Hello and welcome to our Friday night sports edition of The Drum. I'm Steve Kinane. Coming up, the countdown to the Ashes. Do we have enough fit and informed cricketers 6 days out from the first test? We'll cross live to Jim Maxwell at Bellerive Oval for a wrap on the England versus Australia A match and the FIFA decision that could impact on Australia's dream of hosting the Soccer World Cup. Our panel tonight, Peter Wilkins from ABC Sport, former Australian fast bowler Geoff Lawson, and Patrick Stack from Fox Sport News. Well, this week, former England coach Duncan Fletcher labelled Australia's Test cricket team the worst side he'd seen in 30 years. He said while England's preparations had been excellent, the Australian side looked in disarray. In 6 days' time, we'll find out who's right when the first Ashes Test begins in Brisbane. Wilco, is Duncan Fletcher right, do you reckon?
Oh, I hope not. I'm loving hearing him say it because that would give some confidence to the Australians. Part of me says that there is a bit of a smell of death about the team, given that the selectors haven't instilled the players with much confidence by selecting 17 10 days out. And following on from that, at a moment when you should be instilling confidence, you're sapping the confidence from them. Nathan Horrocks, you say you're having a bowl off, then he only bowls 1 over for 7 runs in the match at the SCG and drops the crucial catch. Now, how would his confidence be now? Rather than pick the 12 or 13 10 days out, if you must, and then those players can then go into the Sheffield Shield round or the Australia A match and think about that job rather than, oh, gee, have I got to score runs to be in the test? So that's one half of it. I think on one level it's shaping up as Ricky Ponting and his team of merry men versus all the critics within Australian cricket, the experts, and England's on the side here, because if there's success from the Australian team in the first test, there'll have to be a lot of humble pie eaten in the other quarter. Likewise, if the critics are right and there's that fear that there hasn't been that regeneration, then, it's a long way back from a bad result in the first test.
Geoff, are the critics right? Is Australia in a dark place at the moment?
Well, I think Australia have got England exactly where they want them.
Really?
They've got England as the red-hot favourites for this competition. Yeah, it is unusual in the last 15 years, I'd say, for Australia to enter a summer being so unsettled. There's no doubt about that. And they've caught themselves in a position between not moving on all those older players and not having all those young geniuses. And we've got a few young geniuses, not moving them into the team. And they're stuck right in between it, and we've got a first test in 6 days. England are playing some nice, tough, competitive cricket. Australia are, they're uncertain, no doubt about that. That doesn't mean come Thursday week, or next Thursday, that they'll do the job. That certainly doesn't guarantee that. But if I go back to 86, 87, leading up to the first test match in a series where England beat us fairly comprehensively on our own turf, England were dreadful. Just about everyone had beaten them. I think the country 11 had beaten them. And I think the quote from well-known English cricket writer Martin Johnson was, can't bat, can't bowl, can't field. Yeah. They were that bad, it was ridiculous. And they came out and they took the action
on the first day, didn't they? And then they got the momentum.
Bill Athey and Chris Broad. And they did it the whole summer. So we don't want to get too carried away with it. So I think in some ways being unsettled puts pressure on players. Now, Wilco says, we don't want to walk out in that Shield game having to make runs to get in the team. I think you do. No. Because that's how it used to be.
They also named the team after the Shield match, not before it, didn't they? They virtually put players on notice. Yeah, Hussey made some runs terrific today. Great. Yeah. So should he then sit on his hands and say, well, thankfully, I'll be in the team because Usman Khawaja's made none, Callum Ferguson's made none.
Yeah, I mean, Hussey's got 100 today. The others have failed. I mean, I think that's just got him across the line to be in that test match. Other way around, he wouldn't be. I think that's a great place to be. You've got to be under pressure because come that first test match, England will put them under pressure. You've got to be in that situation. So you've got to perform. And unfortunately, in our Shield games this week, we've had a lot of wickets that favoured bowlers, and it hasn't been perfect.
There you go. Grab that for the tape. Geoff Lawson says, unfortunately, there were some wickets that favoured bowlers. Patrick Stack, what do you make of the preparation of England and Australia leading into this test match?
Yeah, well, I think it's no secret that Australia's preparation's been abysmal. It's been a nightmare, but it shouldn't go unsaid that Cricket Australia have played a massive part in the poor preparation. The very fact that they scheduled the announcement of this squad a week out from when the test was going to be played is always going to make life difficult for the selectors when they didn't really know whether they were Arthur or Martha at the time either. So they've ended up naming a 17-man squad. I mean, there was a line in one of the papers this week that after this weekend they might want to expand that over the weekend, get a few more players in there. But because they weren't really in a position to know who was in or who was out at that stage. So I think they're their own worst enemies in a big sense, Cricket Australia. In stark contrast, the English have had a dream preparation. They got to Australia early. They've played plenty of tour matches. They've looked really good in all of them. They're doing a real number on Australia A down in Bellerive, and that's with their second string bowling attack as well. None of their frontline bowlers are there. They're all up in Brisbane getting ready for the test. I don't think you could really see a much more stark contrast, but as Jeff says, we're going to have to wait until the first test before we see where it's really going to be at.
If you're a punter, you'd be leaving your hard-earned cash, Australia at $1.72 or whatever they were, in your pocket. You wouldn't be going near them at the moment.
Apparently swung around today.
That's entirely feasible. It's just that that transition period, as Jeff says, has not been made. So that first test, say Hussey goes out, Mike Hussey. Now, is he going to be Mr. Cricket? If he scores runs in the first test and saves his career, he will have restored the moniker of Mr. Cricket. If he doesn't, and he makes nothing in the first or second innings, he's going to have to be axed. Marcus North, likewise. The team is going to be under so much pressure. So I'm not sure whether that's such a positive thing when you're having two players in the middle order under enormous threat of their positions. If they fail in the first test, they'll be gone.
But they shouldn't be, though. I mean, we've gone way too early on the panic button with this pair. Hussey's averaging a tick under 50 in Test cricket. Admittedly, over the last 2 years, he scored just 2 centuries and he's averaged around about 33.
He's down from 75, though.
Yeah,
he's averaged 24 in his last 8 Test innings. He's on the form. He's a light of other days.
But who are you going to replace him with? Callum Ferguson averages 36 in first-class cricket. That's not even Test cricket. Well, and Khawaja's just gone and made a first-ball duck and a 7 in the first innings.
Jeff, who do you reckon should be in that first Test team?
Well, I mean, I honestly thought it was down to this Australia A game. Perfect opportunity for Ferguson and Khawaja to show what they've got. And unfortunately, neither have stood up, and Mike Hussey's got 100. I mean, Khawaja averages over 50 in his first-class career. I think Callum Ferguson is a really good player. I think he's one of the future players for Australia, but I think Usman Khawaja is a class act. I think he really has got what it takes to be a good Test cricketer, but we haven't given them the opportunities. And as I say, we're stuck between a bunch of old blokes and a bunch of young blokes, and selectors have not made that move.
Who should be in the attack? Who should be bowling for Australia in that first Test?
We're much more certain there, and even today, though, I think Mitchell Johnson, I mean, I wouldn't have had him in the first Test, but he got 5 for today, backing up 100. So he just had a game where he's got a really good 100,
form. Yeah.
Good 100 and a 5 for, and he was the guy who was really in doubt. So he's earned his spot.
He's now a middle order batsman.
Yeah, what do you reckon? Pick him at 6 and get another quick in
This
there.
has been suggested, but I don't think we'll go quite that far. But with him at 7 and Haddon at 7 and him at 8, that's pretty good.
So you're saying Hilfenhaus, Bollinger and Johnson?
Well, I'll go for Johnson now after his 5 for today because I mean a 5 for is a batsman's 100 and he's got the wickets. We didn't actually see how he bowled to get the 5 for, but I don't care. You get half the team out, and he knocked over the last half in a hurry. So. Ricky said that it's his go-to man and all that sort of stuff. I would have thought walking across the boundary rope on day one, having won the toss and sent England in, you'd toss the ball to Mitchell going, I hope they land today.
Could have been a Steve Harmison moment.
What about...
Well, that's not that far from the truth.
What about who should be the spinner? Because John Benno this week came out and said Nathan Horrocks was pedestrian and shouldn't be selected for Australia again.
Yeah, that was a bit harsh from JB, who's been a national selector. I mean, he tells it like he sees it. There's no doubt about that. At Brisbane, I'm having a look at that pitch, and I'm maybe not playing a spinner. I'm happy to play 3.
So you'd go 5 seamers, including Watson?
No, I'd have 3 seamers plus Watson plus an extra batsman.
Okay.
Yeah.
And who would you be taking?
You got your backup spinners.
Are you looking for someone who can bowl a bit as well, like Stephen Smith, or are you thinking more just an out-and-out bat at 7?
Before yesterday, I would have gone for Steve Smith, but he got smashed. He didn't bowl well in the Australia A game and went for a few.
But you're talking about picking a straight out. We all want a batsman, so you're not worrying about his bowling anyway.
I'd put Khawaja in.
Yeah.
And because they don't bowl, Kadich bowls.
Yeah.
Isn't?
Kadich has hurt his shoulder though, also, hasn't he?
Well,
We got North Clark
right
and
one,
Caddick
wasn't it?
can bowl spinners between them.
Well, that's right. They've got, and it's Brisbane. It's not a spinning wicket. It's a place where there's one spinner in the world has done brilliantly, and that's SK Warner. And he isn't playing. I don't think.
No,
I don't think
he still could. Wilco, who should be in that team?
Well, just back to the transitional period.
Yep.
Philip Hughes raged onto the scene, of course, against South Africa, made runs. Then he was dropped because of a technical flaw in his batting, which was probably there. But he didn't really deserve to be dropped. And so I feel that he probably should have been one of those players. You pitch in and you say, well, you've got 10 or 12 or 13 or 14 tests or whatever, and we're going to back you. You play him at opener with Cadich, you move Watson down the order. Despite Watson's prolific opening record recently, you have to get a young talent like Hughes into the side, rather than demoralising him, shattering his confidence by dropping him. Then he got a shoulder injury, and he's sort of edging his way back. But for such a prolific youngster to have such a roller coaster early part of his career, I don't think that lent well to the transitional period. You're talking about who's going to play in there. He was one. They carved him up.
Could not agree more, Wilco, with that. I mean, this fabulous debut in South Africa in difficult conditions against quality bowling.
Yeah,
I mean, he was fabulous.
Fire.
And then they dropped him after 3 innings.
Yeah.
In the Ashes, 3 innings, and that was all about Mitchell Johnson's poor bowling. They need Watson to bowl, put him. But I wouldn't be changing. Watson's been so good opening.
Yeah, well,
it's
that's
tough.
all right. Well,
but your point is well taken about not giving those younger guys that opportunity. That's why they're in that situation right now, less than a week out from the Test match, where they're so uncertain about who they want.
But isn't the lesson with those younger guys? I mean, you look to Marcus North and Mike Hussey. The fact that they had to spend 10 years in Sheffield Shield, absolutely piling on runs before they could prove themselves for national selection, and now we seem to be just giving away Test caps like they've come in a Twisties packet. I just think that don't we need to have have these guys prove themselves extensively at the next level?
Maybe not referring to Peter George in that.
but you
Who
also
hasn't been mentioned as playing in this Test. Played the last Test for Australia, not mentioned in it.
Just,
well, hasn't taken a wicket.
I want to talk about the history because, Jeff, you mentioned 86-87, which was the last series that England won in Australia. Now, English journalist Skill Berry wrote an interesting piece this week, and he said that since the 30s, the only time England has won in Australia, it's been for 2 reasons. He said either cricket in Australia has been in crisis, and he talked about 86-87 and the Rebel Tours.
Rebel Tours, yeah.
And 78-9 with World Series cricket. And he said the other times that England has won is when they've had a great fast bowler. Larwood, Tyson and Snow. The question is, does England have the great fast bowler that can win them the Ashes?
They don't have the great fast bowler, but their attack is well above average. It's proven itself recently. The question marks on someone like Steve Finn, who needs to prove himself. Anderson